Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. You know, we are moving into the 2026 campaign season. We're already here, it's 2025. What's going to happen? But you know what? We always have to do a post-mortem, if you will. We have to do a review of what happened in this particular season that we kind of are still in. The 2024 election is something that I think both parties or all parties have to look at, because you have to see what you did well, what you did not so well, and what you can improve upon, what you never want to do again. And in drops Greg Palast, who was with us yesterday. And Greg showed us that with voter suppression, which is something that he talks about, Ariel Gold, attorney Mark Fancher, T.O. Hardman, he talks about it all the time. But somehow or another in the corporate media, that is a discussion that no one wants to have. But he'd been saying for several years, look, voter suppression will take this victory from Democrats, and we're going to pay a price for it. No one really talked about it. No one talked about it in 2016. No one talked about it in 2020. But we should have talked about it then, and we should be talking about it in 2024, because he had the numbers. He said, look, they're still suppressing votes. And the Republicans announced at the beginning of the 2024 cycle, we're going to deploy 50,000 workers in all 50 states and territories to monitor the vote. And the average citizen could purge your vote, could have you removed from the voter rolls. Well, it turns out that happened to the tune of more than 4.7 million people, Ariel Gold. Yeah. A lot of people were purged, and this is how his report began. And let us remember, although he is an award-winning journalist and he is an award-winning documentarian, New York Times best-selling author, he's first a forensic economist from the University of Chicago. So he really does understand the numbers. And so this is how he began with Trump lost, voter suppression won. Here are the numbers. He began, Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of, get this, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Michigan. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Michigan. That's right, T.O. Those four. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency, get this, with 286 electoral votes, according to these projections. 3.565 million votes were lost to mass disqualification, provisional and mail-in ballots, vigilante challenges. All of that cost her. Everyone talks about what she did and did not do as a candidate. No one's really talking about what happened in the system. And he said, you know what? This is all Jim Crow. She would have gained at least another 3.565 million votes. She would have bested President Trump by 1.2 million votes on the popular side. And she would have won on the Electoral College side. Of course, more and more, we see that these reports do not get out. Remember, it was Greg Palast who gave us the definitive information that showed us that the election of 2000 had been stolen. First time I saw it, the first time many of us saw his data, was on the BBC. And then it made its way to Rolling Stone. And by the time everything had been settled, that's when we saw it in a few papers here in the United States. So what do we do with this information now? Democrats are about to meet in Washington and choose new leadership. Do they know about this? And when they know about this, what will they do with the information? What should we do with the information? What should we do about voter suppression? Not just on the presidential level, on every level. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. My father says that to us all the time. Slave masters never retire, he said, Mark Fancher. He said, look, some people are up working all the time. So what do you make of this information? I want you to please, that's right, Velma. How you doing, sweetie? Everybody, please like and share, and meet me over on Blue Sky at santitajackson.bsky.social. I'm on X at Santita J. Meet me over there. And the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please get on over there. Meet me, meet me, meet me. And the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That's the only place, everybody, where I can get new friends. Please meet me there. But I've got this tremendous panel. And let me start with you, Ariel Gold, because we are on our way to Washington. We are looking at new leadership for the Democratic Party as we fight to stay in the Democratic Party, because we, have our issues, but, we're trying to give it this old college try. Indeed, I'm wondering if Alan Minsky and the Progressive Democrats of America, all of our friends are going to be there. And they said, look, let's just give it this try. I'm going to try. As my father often says, Attorney Mark Fancher and Theo Hardiman, I hear you, you're right, but guess what? If you as leadership get too far in front of the people you're leading, they can't see you. And then they get lost. And I tell you, just down through the years, given what we've experienced with the Democratic Party in Chicago before Reverend even ran for president, and this having grown up in Chicago, Theo, we've never had a friendly relationship with the Democratic Party. But they have the city locked up. This is what we got to deal with. We got it. Okay. And here it is. Here we are. What should the Democrats do with this information? What will you do with this information? What will you do with it? What will you do? And there were still some mistakes, some errors, Ariel, that the candidate and the actual campaign made. There's no question about that. Okay. But I'm asking you, were you surprised by this information?
No, of course not. I mean, voter suppression is as old as apple pie, or as old as the end of Jim Crow, right? And that's what a repressive system does, right? It recycles itself. So when Jim Crow ended, the prison industrial complex came in, and economic segregation and voter suppression. And we know that this is an issue. I was thinking about that idea of like leaving the Democratic Party, and it feels the same to me as like leaving the United States, right? We can know how horrible that is, and yet how horrible the US is. And yet if we leave, then there's fewer people. And right now, this is what we have. This is the system that we have, and we may have the privilege ourselves to leave it, but there's a lot of folks that are suffering right now because we're under a Trump administration, that are suffering terribly, that are headed to Guantanamo because he's opening that up for deportees, opening up Guantanamo. So, we have to work with what we've got. And I think of this as like the difference between abolition and reform, right? And I think we can actually do both. We can criticize and be horrified with and work for a better system that is not a broken two-party Republican system, while also working to reform the Democratic Party and trying not to lose the next election, because we can't afford to do that. And my God, we've got no better example than Dr. Zogby, who's been fighting with the Democratic Party for 30 years. But one of those fights is that he refuses to leave. And I remember when I first started working on Palestinian rights, and it was so alienating, and folks in my synagogue wanted to kick me out and this and that. And this rabbi friend said to me, she said, that's part of your protest. You just refuse to leave. Like, no, this is not your faith or your community. This is my community too. So this is my party too. And you can alienate me as much as I want, but nope, not going to leave. Not going to leave. Just going to keep working to make it better. So that's my take.
Theo Hardiman, you have run for governor.
Right.
And you got a substantial chunk of vote, nearly 30% in the state of Illinois. And I'm sure you were concerned about the vote, the integrity of the vote. That's something that we think about quite often. So what do you make of this information?
This is astonishing, mainly because now the Democrats have to find a way to put some mechanisms in place to not repeat what just happened while Mrs. Harris lost the presidential race. It makes no sense in the year 2025 that we have to, find this information out later in the process. Because another thing with the Democrats, because I'm beginning to feel a certain way about Trump myself now, and what I mean by that is this guy, man, it just seems like he wants to be punitive all across the board on every category of whatever he's working on. So we cannot afford. I'm not surprised, but what happened, I was trying to be open-minded because the president, that's all that was. But when I seen all this legislation that he's pushing now, is really throwing me all the way off with trying to be open-minded with this guy, because he's not being open-minded with the people. He's very closed-minded, it appears, but he's really punishing people, cutting essential programs, cutting, like for the kids, violence prevention, to a degree, and a lot of different, for example, he wants to, I'm not going to get too deep into it. I just want to talk about the mechanisms being put in place by the Democrats. And one thing the Democrats have to learn, if they don't learn anything else, you cannot, in today's world, you cannot continue to raise up leaders to run for higher level office and expect a politically correct candidate to win. I don't think the world is going to accept politically correct people anymore now. So Democrats may have to kind of get outside of themselves a little bit, trying to be perfect, and just be a little bit more realistic if they want to really compete. Because Donald Trump, he's going to have this one term, his last term. There'll never be another Donald Trump, but you never know who they have waiting in store.
Oh, wait, they got J.D. Vance.
Right.
Because think about it, Tio.
Yes.
He moved to a completely different generation. He's 80 for all intents and purposes. That's right. But Ariel and Mark, he's moving J.D. Vance in, who's brought in by his son. They're of that generation. This is Peter Thiel, who's a little bit older than he is. This 57, we're going to talk about this in the next hour. The 50-something PayPal mafia, if you will, the Silicon Valley crew, who are from apartheid South Africa.
Wow.
That is an apartheid South African German is J.D. Vance's sponsor.
Gotcha.
And what is so unsettling is how smooth he was in the debate. In the debate, Ariel, Mark, and Tio, you said, wait a minute, I think I could get with this guy, right? A lot of people said that.
But I want to say this, Santita, in the year 2025, I understand the Jim Crow South, I've done a lot of my research. The Democrats should have been prepared for this type of fiasco to take place. There's no way in the world they should not have seen this coming. There's ways they had so many, Ms. Harris had over $1 billion to spend on her campaign. There should have been some boots on the ground in every crook and cranny of the electoral process to make sure this did not happen. It would have been a total different outcome. So that's my take on it for, right now for starters, all right?
But Tio, didn't we say that for months, Ariel, Mark, but hey, even though Mark is like, look, I think the whole system is rotten. I hear you, Mark. That having been said, before we bring up you Dr. LaShawn Latrice, who is a community organizer here in Chicago too, aside from being a community psychologist, they said, it was published, Tio, we're deploying 50,000 poll watchers basically across the country.
Right.
What else do they need to tell you? Why?
Right. But you need, in a situation like a presidential election, there was a need to probably have about 250,000 poll watchers.
They said this is what we're doing.
Right.
I didn't hear the Democrats privately or publicly issue keep. I didn't hear them saying anything.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I know. Attorney Mark Fancher.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me take a deep breath. But We love Attorney Fancher because you know what? Let me tell you something, everybody. Everybody here represents a point of view.
Mhm.
And what we have to do is open up our minds and listen to each other. So somewhere between all of our experiences and points of view, we can come up with something that's really going to work. Because the fact is, people are closer to Mark than they want to say. Just most people don't have the courage to leave. The fact is, the plurality of Americans don't identify with either party. So what is that telling you? I mean, I can tell you, I'm speaking to my nieces and nephews are in their early 20s. And they and their friends are like, are you serious right now? You campaigned with Cheney. Y'all, all y'all do is war, war, war. I mean, are you serious right now? I mean, and that's what I kept hearing yesterday because we were all together. I kept hearing, are you serious? You can't be serious. Attorney Mark Fancher.
Yeah, this country developed a very deep-seated and enduring fear of African people, particularly enslaved African people, early in the country's history. And there was good reason for that because they resisted so fiercely, so continuously, by running away, by setting fire to the crops, by killing the masters, by raising insurrections, by doing everything that they could do to be free. And they were so afraid of them that they responded not only with horrific torture and in some cases just outright killing, but they also changed completely the narrative of what went on during that period. And they transformed a very rebellious people in the minds of most into a docile, imbecilic people who never did anything and who accepted their enslavement uh, happily and delightfully. And it is one of the great crimes that was committed against African people um, because it got to the minds of the people, their descendants, many of whom are very ashamed of their ancestors because of misinformation. But the truth of what happened during that period was never lost on the oppressive forces in this country. And after abolition, they did everything that they could do to ensure that there would never be fair and just participation by this population in elections, because they knew that these were a determined people, that they were an intelligent people. And so, from the very outset, in addition to the use of clan terror and vigilante terror and lynching and other things, they imposed and required literacy tests and poll taxes and other devices that were intended to keep people from full participation in the electoral process. So when we look at what's going on today and we see voter suppression and see who it's directed at, it should come as no surprise. It fits neatly into the fabric of what this country has all been all about with respect to its electoral process. And my thought is that knowing that history and knowing that from the very outset that this country was never intended to include Black people in particular. I mean, it's in the Constitution, it's in the Dred Scott opinion. They knew right from the start that this country was never intended to include us in its political life. That should inform not only Black people, but other oppressed people of color in this country in terms of their attitude toward this entire thing. There are many contemporary immigrants who come from a number of different countries, whether it's Cambodia or Vietnam, or whether it's Haiti, or whether it's from any number of places in the global South, and Arab countries and the Southern Asian countries. They come here with a mindset, with an understanding of what America is all about. And they come here knowing that they're not going to be embraced, that when they come here, that nobody is going to look at them fondly and welcome them and say, we're glad you're here. They know that they're going to be regarded as others and as outsiders, and they're going to be excluded. And many of these communities don't look to advance by trying to participate in the political process. They pursue a number of other ways in which to try and get a firm foothold in this country and to try and build security for their communities, both economically and socially and otherwise and culturally. But politics is not something that they look at as a way to advance their communities because they know that this is not a welcoming place for them, that they will not be embraced by an electorate, that they will not win, they will not have success in the political process. Okay. Black people in particular are looked at in the same way, that nobody is looking to welcome them into the political process. But compounding the challenge of the Black community in particular is the fact that it's not just a question of fondness or affinity or an attitude toward us, it's structural. The process itself is designed to keep us out. And to the extent that the process's legitimate structure is not designed to do that, then there are other things that are done in order to prevent our participation. And what that says to me is that for a community that is excluded and oppressed in that way, to continue to think that that very process, which is designed to keep them out and to keep them down, is one which they can use in order to advance their interests, is idiotic. And I really honestly think that for us to continue to invest as much intellectual energy, as much time, as much in the way of financial and other resources in trying to change a duopoly, trying to turn a Democratic Party, which has demonstrated itself to be an enemy of humanity, into something that's good and that looks out for us and which is going to provide us with a pathway to liberation, is a fool's mission. And I'm not here to say that I have the alternative solution. I've got many, many ideas. But I do think that collectively, all of the energy that we're putting into the Democratic Party is like throwing resources and money and time and energy down the toilet, when we could use all of that to try and build something that's very different. Other communities have managed to survive and to, in some cases, rise without necessarily being involved in this ridiculous political process that this country has set up. We're no less capable of doing that. It's just a question of whether we have the will and whether we're able to liberate our minds from having been persuaded so thoroughly that that's the only way for us to advance in this country.
Dr. LaShawn Latrice, making noise for change. He's made quite the statement. And Ariel, when I listen to Attorney Fancher, I don't hear someone who's been defeated. I hear someone who's very hopeful, because that's what I hear with the young people. They want something so completely different. Jonah Karsh from If Not Now, our little baby, our young gun organizer, he became very agitated on one of the shows. He's one of the most amiable, sweet people you ever want to meet. He said, "Look, let me tell you something. I don't want the world you've got. God bless you." He said, "I don't want it. I want another world. And my generation, we're going to fight for something else. I don't want this." He said, "I don't want genocide. I don't want race. I don't want any form of racism. I'm sick of all of it. So just know that what you're fighting for," he said, "I'm not fighting for it." Somebody had said something that just made him jump across the Rubicon. I said, "Okay, I hear you." Because see, he's the age of our children. And they're already down the street. You see this, Mark, with your own son. They're gone. These fights that we're waging, they're old fights. They're like, "Look, I got another world. I've had a black president. I've had women doing that. Look, y'all have not brought me what I want. So you know what? I'm coming up with something else." Dr. LaShawn Latrice, first of all, what do you make of this information when you see that voter suppression? I don't know. It seems like since Obama, we don't even think about voter suppression and the theft of votes, Ariel. Because I was concerned about that in 2008. No one seemed to care. And you know, like, what's going on? We're going to world. You all really trust the system this much? And Democrats have flipped. We're now the war party. We're now the party who believe in the alphabet agencies. I mean, it's just as I don't recognize this place, and this is not where I am. But Dr. LaShawn Latrice, are you surprised when you see that when you look at all the ways that the votes were suppressed, that according to Greg Palast calculations, and he used, by the way, everybody, U.S. government data, voting data from this past election. This is not something he just pulled out the sky, Ariel. He went and filed the request, got the information, and saw how people voted, and saw the votes that were thrown out.
I am not surprised at all by what the data shows, because if you think about the very short process of, the election, and once the person had already come out and announced who the Democratic candidate was, it was too much energy put in all these other things. But you never heard anyone from the Democratic Party talking about voter suppression or anything like that. If anything, you were on this show bringing awareness to what it looked like in so many different ways, and it caught people's attention. And I think that documentary, it made it to a lot of places. But I think there was already voter suppression taking place, in the previous elections. And so when it came down to people losing faith in the party or their party, that a lot of people just bowed out gracefully out of the process. And I think more people did that than they want to admit. And I also think people lied. I think a lot of people said they were like, Team Kamala, Team Kamala. And then when they got to that voters booth, they looked over their shoulder like, please. And so I think a lot of people did not tell the truth. They just got into the crowd of, how people like to follow the leader. But I really think that too much time, energy, and effort went into talking about the race of the candidate, not exploring real issues, not including certain populations of people. And so it's very easy to creep in and do more voter suppression, because many of those people probably never showed up anyway. And so the ones who did show up and they took their votes and did whatever, it probably did surprise Donald Trump, because the very first time he won, I still said when he got up there, he was looking like, God, I can't believe this.
Wait, girl, I was next door. Wait, hold on. You all, my hotel was next door. I was working that night. I was with Fox. And we were sitting there watching the tables run. I'm sitting with my brother, who was not in Congress yet. We were sitting in the lobby of the Sheraton. Number one, a lot of Hillary's people were still there, Ariel, and it was like 6:30. We said, this is not good. But a couple of days before, they had canceled the balloon drop. Remember that, Ariel? And I said, oh, they already know. Because the internal polling, Mark, you know this, Tio, better than anyone, because you've done it. And so I was like, oh boy, this is bad. And my brother looked at me. It wasn't even 7:00. He said, he has run the tables. He's winning. I said, it's not 7:00. He said, doesn't have to be. Look at this. You just look at where this is going. We didn't even get out of our segment on Fox when they called the race. And it was early. We had another hit like at 3:00 in the morning and another one like at 6, 7 the next morning. It was the most bizarre thing. But even then, it's just like Democrats are resistant to the information when you try to give it to them. And even we could see in the chat when people were saying that, oh, you're just Trumpers. I'm like, we're just trying to tell you, Ariel, come on. You're laughing, Sean, but Dr. Latrice, maybe you can help me to do a head, examine our heads, because I don't get it. Because we kept saying, Ariel, wait a minute, you all, you're missing this here. I even had a young person say to me yesterday, who's 23, He's a college graduate, one of the most elite schools in the country, and thus the world. He said, why did she run on sorority and one of the most elite Black schools in the world? Are you for real? He said, who was she talking to? He voted for her. He said, well, he said, I never would have done that. He said, most Americans don't go to college. You went to FAMU, top business school, one of the top business schools in the country. You know, you were like, now I know I'm HBCU, all of that. I know the Divine Nine. I wouldn't have done that. So even with the 3.5 million that was suppressed out, Ariel, I mean, going into Washington this weekend, because I think we should talk about these numbers that we've seen. What do you say? Because I don't know how they're going to receive it. Even bring it to them. Wait a minute. Okay, I'm just looking. They're talking about dropping the case against New York City Mayor Adams. Well, he's always been marginally Republican, so I'm not mad at him. He doesn't want a case.
They dropped the case against him.
About to.
That's so next. Okay. I'm sorry. I got distracted you all. I have to keep the news on to see what's going on. Distract. But Ariel, okay, you're going to be called a Trumper, and we're already going in the old fuddy-dudge, but that's okay because I'm with it, because my thing is you need to be rooted in history, and you need to have an eye toward the future, which is where I think Dr. Zogby comes in. He's been fighting for the future that we got to, and he's fighting for the future where we need to go to. So, where do we go with this kind of information? What do we say?
Look, we were trying to take the Republican Party's discards, their scraps, right? Like the Republican Party didn't want Liz Cheney, right? She couldn't even keep her own seat. And we were like, oh, let's run Liz Cheney for the election. And
girl, they have more horses than people where she's from. Well, I'm like, what is she talking about?
She's going to get Kamala elected. But and I hear a lot of the candidates for the DNC talking about, I can raise this much money and I can raise this much money. And I'm like, money wasn't the problem. It wasn't that we didn't have enough money to get Kamala elected. That was not the problem. We cannot be the money party, the corporate party, the Liz Cheney party, the defense industry party, the pharmaceutical industry party. We need to be the party of the people. We need to be the opposite of that. We need to find our strengths, not take their leftovers, which is, what we're doing. And I hear, that's a lot of what the candidates for the DNC are saying. Like, oh, we'll do more of the same, but we'll do more of it, but we'll raise more money this time. And I'm like,
you're not.
No.
Didn't you hear this young woman?
That wasn't the problem. The problem was they didn't like us.
Did you hear this young woman who's been all over television and they banished her from the party? She said, look, I can't go back to my people. They feel like they were lied to. I forget this young lady's name. She said, they feel like they were lied to. And my people are saying, you know what? You knew that she was not polling as well as she needed to poll. And she said, and the problem that she's having with the party now is that Mark, Dr. Latrice, Tio, when she goes back with the information, they don't even want to hear her.
That's crazy.
They banished her. Have they not, Ariel? I mean, she said, no, people, now the party's angry with me.
Well, go ahead, Ariel.
I was just saying, Kamala kept giving us joy and these fancy rallies and expensive TV ads. And hello, newsflash, the country isn't feeling joy and isn't all rich and fancy like you. The country wants somebody of the people. And the closest they had to that was the rhetoric coming from Trump. And surprise, surprise, that's how they voted.
Also,
sounded like he's straight out of Queens.
But also,
Yeah,
Santita, I know you mentioned when I ran for governor, for example, the polls had me at like 7, 8% of the vote, but I knew I was at a higher level of percentage, right? I mean, polling, because I ended up
Why?
finishing close to 30.
Why?
I knew because I talked to over 400,000 people personally in Illinois myself because I had a counter, and I counted every time I met with somebody throughout the entire state. I went on like a statewide crusade during my campaign. But the
So
point
wait a
I'm
minute. I'm hearing crusade and grassroots. Is that it?
grassroots organizing and crusade. So the point I'm making, I knew I was going to finish on a higher level. It's just the polls play games with people's psyche sometimes and throws us off. So, brother Fancher, I really respect what you're saying because I'm a revolutionary by birth. I just want to say that, and I mean that in an intellectual way as well. All right, I want to make that clear, intellectual way. But the reality is that it's problematic. It's real problematic out here now because the Democrats, like Ariel was saying, the Democrats have got to find a way. You said they may not even want to hear the. Sorry, but I don't have a cold, and I just got a little allergy, everybody. But let me say this:
It's okay. It's okay.
the Democrats do not want to hear about the new information that's been revealed. That is outrageous to me, and it was outrageous that they lost the election at the same time, right? So if they're not going to learn from the past, I don't know what kind of future we're going to have here, as far as Democrats getting back in any kind of power, especially on a presidential level. All right.
I mean, look, and here we're surrounded by South Africans.
That's another heavy hit. That's another hit.
We're going to talk about that in the next hour. I mean, Mark Fancher. We are David Sachs, who moved to Tennessee. You got Peter Thiel. You got Elon Musk. You've got one of the Botas here. I mean, this is what we have going, and then we cannot have an honest discussion about where things went wrong. Because I'm here. I mean, I'm one of your people, Tio. You did get almost 30% of the vote,
right?
And it was not a shock to me. It was not a shock when Harold Washington won in 1983.
That's right.
Just if you were on the ground in Michigan, Mark, in 1988, the way Reverend was campaigning, you felt something when you got to Michigan. So in that field of 6 or 7 candidates, when he got 56% of the vote, his people were clear. Oh, we got this. Now, they didn't take their foot off the gas, but Mark, you can't even have the conversation.
No, and you never will. There is not a time in history when people who have been excluded, specifically people of African descent, not a time in history when we've got anything done through the political process. Never. But we invest 99.9% of our energy in trying to participate in it. The only time that we've gotten things done is when we've been on the outside trying to make things happen. We were definitely excluded from the political process when we were enslaved. And we got ourselves out of that situation through resistance, in a number of different ways, some of which I mentioned earlier. We were not part of the political process during the entire Jim Crow period, but we made advances through our ingenuity and intellect and enterprising spirit by, in many different ways, establishing ourselves economically and otherwise. To the extent that we accomplished anything politically, it was during a brief window during Reconstruction. And they came and they snatched all of that away from us without much trouble at all. We made progress in the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, not through the political process, but by making America uncomfortable, disrupting things, causing all kinds of trouble that forced the process to do that which we needed it to do. Many people celebrate the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education opinion. It's a landmark opinion in an intellectual sense, in an academic sense. But in 1954, when that decision came down, nothing happened. Nothing happened until Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat and triggered a movement that forced the structure to respond. So we've elected countless numbers of Black mayors. We've had people in Congress for a very long time. We've had a Black president. We've done all of the political things, and through that avenue of struggle, we've accomplished almost nothing. We've gotten some superficial changes. We've done a number of things, but the real change, when it has come through the political process, has been because of things we were doing outside of it. And I think that we continue to invest so much energy in trying to be insiders that we don't recognize the futility of it and the prospects and the promise of looking a totally other way. And I think much of it has to do with our comfort level. It's a whole lot more comfortable to resort to and default to the standard refrain that we always hear. Well, if we're going to progress, we got to get people registered to vote. We got to get people to come out and vote. We got to get the right people in office. That's comfortable to us. We've been saying it for decades. We love saying it. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel comfortable. It makes us feel hopeful. But it also is leading to nowhere. And it's much more challenging. It demands much more of us for us to think completely outside of that and to look at the world and to say, where is it that we have possibilities of achieving real power? Where is the real power in the world? I mean, it doesn't rest in the political system or the political process. It rests in the control of resources that the rest of the world must have. Africa has more in the way of natural wealth and natural resources than any landmass on the planet. And if our focus was on working to build a global African family that was committed to the survival, the advancement, and the liberation of African people, and we had our aim set squarely on trying to get control of those resources out of the hands of the multinational corporations and the former colonizers and into the hands of African people on a mass level, our reality would change in ways which we cannot even imagine. But we're not thinking in those terms. Even if we didn't limit it to Africa, but we looked at all of the oppressed communities throughout the global South, and we said that what we want to do is to work with you collaboratively to come up with strategies so that we can strategically boycott major multinational corporations that are harming us, so that we can strategically disrupt and sabotage the military operations that have locked down our various countries and communities, so that we can work to achieve a real liberation. If we were thinking in those terms, we'd make far more progress than we're making now. And so, again, I know I'm in some ways a broken record, but in terms of the political process, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, the only thing I want to do with either of them is to see their demise.
Well, you know what? I have to tell you, I don't think you sound like a broken record. I don't. I think that politics has its place, but I think that whenever you get comfortable, that becomes the problem. And many of us, Mark and Dr. Latrice and T.O. Hardeman, and I think this is just a human problem. I'm not so sure we wanted to end slavery as much as we just wanted to get out of the fields. How many stories do we tell about Sally Hemings? How often do we mention Harriet Tubman? I mean, think about it. I mean, there's some things that we want to be in the big house. Even though it's burning, Mark. We don't want to end imperialism. We want our turn to be the imperialist. We want to get into the high places just to change faces. We don't want to change our minds. We don't want to change how things are done. And I have to tell you, Mark, you remind me of my mother. We had gotten to San Francisco, and I've told this story to everyone before. No one expected Reverend to live through that, to make it through the first campaign. No one did. And they wrote about it openly. Because Black leaders of his stature didn't live past 39, and he was already 42. So, and we were not at peace with it, but we understood that was likely the price that our father was going to have to pay. It was likely the price that my mother's husband was going to have to pay. And as painful as that was, we knew he had to go. He had to he had to just do it. And that's what she told me. She told me, I don't care how you feel. He's thinking about not running because he doesn't want to upset you. He is so worried that you're traumatized by this. Then you go into that room and you tell him that you support him 100% and you want him to do that more than that. And let's just, and because if something happens, y'all are all on me. And if I can take it, you can take it. Go. Talk to him right now. I said, okay. So we got to the end, praise the Lord. And out of that whole field, he became a top tier candidate. And no one absolutely expected him to do that. And my mother walked into the living room, of our hotel rooms, and she said, God has said something to me. Flesh and blood didn't reveal this. She said, and I want you to know that God did not bring us this far. Who knew we'd get here? God didn't bring us here so that we could do the same thing that our oppressors have done. That is not going to take us to the White House. He won't let us do that. So let us be clear on our mission. That's why when Reverend opened up his speech, my constituents are the damned, they're the despised, they're the dispossessed. They are restless and they seek relief. And he never abandoned his people who were the people. Now we got to make a decision about who we're going to represent. Who we're going to represent. And you're right. Malcolm was a wise prophet. He was right. But let me tell you something about the way the government is structured. 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, your freedom from slavery, your citizenship and your vote are tied to each other. That is the way this system is structured. And what you can't do is vote and then be satisfied with the status quo. That's what so many of us want. I don't know about the Black Boule lifestyle and all that. I hear you because I went to Howard and I'm a Delta and I'm all of that. All of that. My father's a Q. My mother's a GDI. She said, I got my Greek. I married him. So that's it. I'm done with that. So so that's not what that is. For those of us who joined, some of us joined because it is public service. And this was a way for all of us to get together. That's what we did. So, come on, everybody. So the whole Boule thing, I'm hearing you, but that's not why I didn't even know what that was when I got in. So you know what? I've got Dr. David Gibbs here for a couple of minutes before we go. I'm so sorry we got you so late. But we got something else if you want to join us in the next 30 minutes, because we're going to talk with Chris McGreal from The Guardian. He used to be with The Guardian. He was their Washington, Jerusalem, and Johannesburg correspondent. And he's going to talk about these PayPal mafias, the mafia. David Sachs, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and all of these people who are from apartheid South Africa. How did they take over Silicon Valley and the government?
David Sachs is from South Africa too?
Absolutely. His family's from South Africa. He was just raised in Tennessee. They're part of the South African diaspora. You can't make this stuff up. And Peter Thiel was raised in a town where they celebrated Hitler's birthday. See, I've been to South Africa, y'all, and when you get there, it's like when you go to the American South, and it's not the same. I mean, it's when you get clear on whiteness and blackness real quick. You go, whoa, wait a minute. White supremacy, this is a real thing. You get it. And if you let people talk long enough, you hear it. So, what I want to get some closing thoughts from everybody about, just about where we go from here, because I have to get on over to Chris McGreal, and I'm going to send you the link, David Gibbs, because you can just listen, because he's going to share, because he's been doing all of this research. But I would love to have you weigh in, because, yeah, the South Africans are large and in charge in the United States today. The 50-somethings who grew up in apartheid South Africa. T.O. Hardiman, what's our takeaway from what we've learned today?
No, I would just like to encourage everybody to put your seatbelts on, because we're headed for a tough ride here in the United States. And then also the Democrats have to be a little bit more open-minded when it comes down to facing the truth as far as the failures in regards to what happened during the last presidential race. That's my takeaway. They should really take that information, embrace the information, and make good of it moving forward.
Okay, all right. Dr. LaShawn Latrice.
My last words about this would be we have to encourage people to not be afraid to call their elected officials out, especially the arrogancy of the Democratic Party in just thinking they could do whatever they wanted to do and not listen to the voice of the people. So I think they are digging themselves further in. And if they don't pay attention and they don't listen to what people are actually saying from the grassroots, they're going to find a lot of these states turning red. And that's a big thing right now. And at first I was in denial, but now I see why people are gravitating to these movements.
Oh, absolutely. Mark Fancher, give us a word.
Yeah, God said that my thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways are not your ways. And we don't see what we're going through as being a blessing. But, if you stop and think about it, from his perspective, what we're going through now could be the greatest blessing that we could have.
Absolutely.
Because what we're going through is nothing new. This is the way it's always been. It's just that the people who have been in power in the past have been smoother, more clever about concealing and hiding it. But now it's all being revealed. This is what America is all about. This is the way that America functions. This is the mentality and the mindset of the people who have been running this country all along. And if we don't take advantage of this blessing, look at it in its raw, ugly, naked self, and then learn from it, then that's on us. God has done us a great favor by showing us what it is that we're living in and what we're dealing with. And we have to take the cue and reject all of it. If we don't like what we're seeing right now under the Trump administration and we reject the Trump administration, we need to reject America.
David Gibbs, we see, according to that, and I've got about a couple of minutes here, but I've sent you the link to the next hour because I'd love you to weigh in. I mean, Mark, you could too, Dr. LaShawn Latrice, because he is telling the story about the PayPal mafia. Being South African, products of apartheid South Africa. But we're seeing that, according to the forensics, that economist and best-selling author and investigative reporter, Greg Palast has shown us that Kamala Harris should have won by 3.5 million votes. He said when you factor in votes that were thrown out, voter suppression, voter purges, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the things that he has been sounding the alarm about, he said that was 4.7 million votes, but it cost her 3.5 million votes. And not only would she have won the popular vote, but she would have gotten 286 electoral college votes. Wow. Dr. Gibbs?
Yeah, Greg Palast is a good reporter, and I would think we should take this very seriously, his claims. And obviously, we have a long history of voter suppression. Traditionally, it's been, back in the day, you might say it was more the Democratic Party that did it, especially in the South. In recent decades, it's been the Republican Party, of course, that's taken up this graceful practice. And we've seen this repeatedly, trying to have fewer available voting places in heavily Democratic areas, especially among people of color, voting machines that break down mysteriously, and so on. Purging of votes basically periodically in a very partisan way. This has happened in the past, and so it would not be astonishing if it happened this time. As a general point, I mean, I'd like to see others verify this. I mean, we've had from one person, Palast, and so we have to be a little bit cautious here before we fully embrace this issue. But it's certainly something that needs to be looked at very carefully. In that it could very well be that this is an authentic scandal. I've said before in the show, I think some of the scandals the Democrats have brought out against Trump are a little bit contrived. The charge against him brought in New York City about his, affair with Stormy Daniels, that just seemed foolish to have brought those charges, in my view, and counterproductive. But this is a real. If this pans out as something that actually happened, the way Greg Palast said it happened, this is an authentic scandal. It'll be a real stain on the second Trump presidency, and we have to look into this very carefully.
Well, you know what? I think that at the very least, we should pay attention.
Yes.
And we should be asking, well, is this true? I mean, it just seems to me that far too often Democrats say, well, okay. They walk away from the fight, and it makes people angry. You know, It's like, wait a minute, hold on. This is my vote. You told me I needed to do it. You even wagged your finger in my face and told me that if I didn't do it, there was something wrong with me. And then you let it go. You let it go in 2000. You let it go in 2004. You just continue to let it go. So everybody, let's talk about the PayPal mafia in the second hour. In the second hour, there are so many people who are very powerful in our government who are products of apartheid South Africa. Elon Musk, who just gave us a Nazi salute. People, the ADL told us to give him grace. I've never heard that in my life. Yeah, you can't make it up. And so the ADL said, give him grace. Give him grace. He didn't really mean that. They said that. And then you've got Peter Thiel. Oh yeah, he's from Namibia. Well, Namibia did not exist 30 years ago, okay? That it was Southwest Africa. Yeah. So these guys are South African. Even David Sachs, although he was raised in Tennessee, his family's South African. They fled to the United States. They're part of a South African diaspora. Who are they? What is going on here? Come on over to the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a moment here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. All right.